I think I could talk till I'm kind of blue in the face about the importance of early childhood music education, and I'd have a lot of support, scientific support. But I don't know that that's what's going to convince a parent.
Yes, I agree.
So I think what they want is a good human. And how am I going to create and help my child be a good human? And we can offer that. It's so much more than music. So kind of our tagline is music now, skills for life, music. So it's so much more than just music. It's really teaching them how to be socialized and nice, kind humans. And so that is where I really put a lot of our weight in, even our ad copy, in the educational little videos that I do, both in-house and even in marketing. And even some marketing surveys that we've done, or even surveys of our own families, like why did you come and why did you stay, have been a couple of questions that we've asked. And the why I wanted to come is I just wanted something fun to do with my kid. And there's not a whole lot of options for 2-year-olds. So I just wanted something fun. And then but why I stayed is the relationships that we've made and the skills that my child has learned on in all sorts of areas. And it's usually not even musical skills that they're referring to.
Hey, welcome back to the podcast, everyone. A couple weeks ago, we had Jessica Hanson on the pod. We did our first 5 for 5 in almost a year, and she gave a lot of great advice, practical advice about growing as a school owner. When we first met Jessica in the Founders Forum, what we found out was she had a fantastic preschool program that she's been running at Take Note Studio for a long time now. And that is a topic that is an area of concern for a lot of school owners that comes up over and over and over again. Oh, I want to start a preschool program because, the idea is get them in young, have them build a relationship with your studio and the teachers there, have the parents build a relationship with your studio and the teachers there. We have never, to this point, done an episode on preschool program. We've referenced it, we've talked about it, we've said it's a good strategy, but we've never actually done a full episode on it, nor have we interviewed someone who is what I'll call an expert in that topic. So, Jessica, we're really glad that you're coming back on the pod to talk about Take Note and the preschool program that you've built there. So we just thank you for taking the time out.
Thank you.
So very first question, let's just lay the groundwork. Let's just get all the context out on the table so that as we ask questions, as we go along in the podcast, we'll have that context available. Maybe just describe Take Note, describe your preschool program. I think that's a good place to start.
Okay, well, Take Note Studio has we're starting our 20th year this fall. So I established it in 2006, and I was a young mom at the time with a few young children, and I had become familiar with a program called KinderMusic, which is an international curriculum company that's been around since the 70s. So pretty well established. It started in Germany, actually, and is thriving in the United States. And I first became aware of it by having my children enrolled in a program, my young children. And so I first became familiar with it as a parent in the program, and then really quickly started to see the benefit of early childhood music education. I was a music major in college, so I had a little bit of knowledge of the importance of music education, but not a lot about early childhood music education, but really fell in love quite quickly with KinderMusic. So it's a music and movement program. They're group classes, always group structure for infants as young as newborn, really. I mean, there's no baby too young, through age 7. And they come, of course, with their parents until they're about 3.5 when they move into our mid-level classes. So there's 5 levels of KinderMusic, from foundations, which is the babies, all the way through level 5, which is our 6 and 7-year-olds. And then and there is a lot of just whole child learning. So we work on every area of development. We do a lot of large motor movement, a lot of fine motor work, a lot of pitch matching and vocalization and singing and lots of instrument and sound exploration, listening skills. I mean, it's really quite brilliant in the research that supports the benefits of child development in a musical context. So that is the curriculum that I use, and those who use it need to be trained through KinderMusic International. So there's a training process that all of my teachers have gone through that teach this program. That is online. The classroom portion of it is online, and then they do a practicum class, some practicum classes that are recorded and graded from KinderMusic International before they can be licensed. So it's a pretty rigorous training process, which has its pros and cons for sure. And I can, talk about that. But yeah, so there's a training process, and then we pay license fees to continue to use the curriculum, those monthly license fees. And then one other aspect of KinderMusic that I do love, and is part of the whole philosophy of the company, KinderMusic, is the home materials that parents receive as part of their enrollment. So they get access to an app where they can stream all of the music that we use in class throughout the week in their homes, and also be interacting with the activities that we do in class that they can do at home. And sometimes kids, most times kids are most comfortable at home, and you can see actually the learning process even better in their home environment. So when they have access to the content that we're using in the classroom in their own homes or even in their car, there's additional benefit to that as well. So yeah, so that's a little bit about the KinderMusic curriculum.
I personally have a couple follow-up questions there. Before I jump into those, I'm just going to ask a really fast question. Across your 3 locations, how many, so you have 450 students total across your 3 locations. Of the 450, how many are KinderMusic students?
250.
Okay. And then ostensibly the other 200 are in some sort of music learning program, piano, voice, that sort of thing.
Right. They're all older. So we don't have any competing programs for under 7. So if they're under 7, they're all in KinderMusic. We don't offer lessons for kids under 7. So anybody over 7, though, would be in our lesson program.
Okay, so I have a 2-part question here. It's very closely related, and then Nate, I want to kick it over to you after these 2 questions, because I'm sure you've got things to ask or things to say. But what motivated you to start a preschool program? That's part 1. And part 2 is, why did you choose KinderMusic over the myriad other programs out there available that also serve this demographic?
Right. Well, I would say personal experience. So having my own children in the KinderMusic program, which was the only program available for early childhood education. So, I picked the only one available that I had, and I really wasn't familiar with it at all. In fact, even as a musician myself, I was a little hesitant and a little like, what, I'm going to bring my 1-year-old to a music class. Why? And why would I spend money on that? And, they're 1. And then I really immediately, though, as a musician, I think that helped. And as a parent, just saw the benefits so quickly of the connections that we were making in the classroom. And then also the musical benefit of the foundations it was laying for my kids to be much more successful in future lesson opportunities than had they had nothing when they first started piano lessons or something like that. So, so I would just say it was my own personal experience. And then and same for, choosing it for my own company. It was really just the only experience I had with early child music curriculum, and I had no reason to go elsewhere. So
my final nuance that I want to get out of there is, in terms of the motivation to start the preschool program, and I just want to double check that I heard you correctly. Was there any business consideration at all, or was it simply, and I'm not talking about why you picked KinderMusic specifically, but just even having a preschool program at all, was it entirely a business decision? Was it entirely a personal experience decision? Was it a little bit of both? I'm curious your thoughts there.
Yeah, it was definitely a little bit of both. Personally, I taught piano a little bit throughout college, and it was fine. That was my instrument. It was, but what I personally really loved was teaching KinderMusic. I loved connecting with young parents. So I knew if I was going to start a business, knowing that I would be the primary teacher for a while, I wanted to teach something I wanted to teach. And I found that KinderMusic was such a joyful thing to teach. And I believed in it so much, even more than just not just, but even more than teaching piano. So personally for me, it was just something I wanted to teach more than anything else. And also I knew that it could potentially make me money. That group classes are usually, the best financial way to make money. And there was also a need in my community. There was nobody really offering anything like this in my community. So I also knew it would be a differentiator as far as business goes. So
yes, and I do agree that group classes are a great way to expand the margins of your studio, which is why grouplessons.com exists, and everyone should go check that out. Nate, I'm sure you've got a lot to say. Go ahead.
Well, first I want to tell a brief story, and then Jessica, I want to get back to your a comment you made in the 5 for 5 app that you were on a few weeks back. At Brooklyn Music Factory, we develop a songwriting curriculum. That's what we're known for. We're known for big music games. And so at one point in our journey, we said, hey, let's start a toddler music program, which is where my partner, Pira, and I met because I came to her Music for Aardvarks, which is another toddler program. And it started by someone actually in Brooklyn, and then it just kind of blew up. But a very, very sort of, kind of what you'd imagine from like an alternative rocker starting a toddler music program. So we started something called Little Songwriters. And I just thought it was the most amazing thing because, the caregiver plus the toddler came in, they wrote an original song every class, and then we sent it over to a couple of our teachers who produced a pro version of it. And at the end of the season, they ended up with a CD at that point or a playlist of all of their original music that they'd written as a group. I was like, this is the coolest idea ever. And we worked so hard to try to fill the class. And we really struggled to the point where eventually we pulled the plug on it because it wasn't worth allocating so much of our marketing and sales and development resources. So broke my heart because still as I describe it right now, Jessica, I'm like, and I went back actually and listened to a playlist from like 2015 or 16, like all these great songs that the parents and the teacher wrote. But it brings me to your comment around Daniel's question about business considerations. And you said, we knew that there was a need in our market. Our assessment of why Little Songwriters was so hard to get off the ground, off the tarmac, we never really took flight in terms of enrollment, was because it was Brooklyn and our specific neighborhoods were already saturated with like Music Together, KinderMusic, Music for Aardvarks. We had another teacher who ran a great program, still does, really good program that's a bilingual Spanish-English toddler music program. At any rate, I'm curious how you went about that assessment. Was it mostly like a parental mom assessment, like you knew the market because Manitowoc is a small enough sort of market where you really knew the parental community, et cetera? Right. Or did you do some other research? And I'm just curious if you could just tell us a little bit around that.
Yeah, well, there were a couple indicators for me. One is that the program that my own kids were in, KinderMusic, was in this community, and it was here. So it was here. KinderMusic had been established here, and it was quite a small little business. And there were a couple of women that ran that program, and then they ended up moving out of the community, and they were just going to shut down their business. I think it was pretty small and on a whim, and because I didn't know anything about business ownership or anything about business, I just said, can I have your mailing list? I might want to do something with this. And I didn't even know like that you should buy that or something, but right. I didn't know
how valuable that is.
Right. And obviously they didn't know either because they just gave it to me. So but I mean, there were probably, 40 names on it or something like that. And I decided that I needed to run with this opportunity before people started to forget about KinderMusic and what it is. So that was helpful to have a little starter pack like that of
like
names.
Customer base,
And then also I was a young mom at the time, so I was in that community of so I had a lot of contacts of people that I could just invite to try it. One other piece, though, that I think is helpful, as as brilliant as we all are as being creators, I do think it is helpful to have a program that's renowned around even the world, and certainly in the United States. I mean, KinderMusic, maybe it's not a household name for sure yet, but people kind of have heard about it, and it's also very well established curriculum that's been very well researched. I mean, I feel very confident in the content, and I think that has been, and certainly KinderMusic International helps with marketing content, with graphics, so there's some support there in being able to sort of purchase a pre-packaged curriculum that we don't have to create ourselves, and believing in its value, and even almost a bit plug and play. I wish it was a little more plug and play. It's not. There's a lot of training that, a good teacher needs to have. But as far as the curriculum goes, it's very good. It's just really, really good stuff that I feel like I don't personally need to try to enhance or recreate or anything like that. So I think that was a big piece for me too, is choosing something that is really well established and has a great track record, and is gaining some awareness around the world, of people kind of knowing what it is. So
you highlighted a couple key principles that I think we forget sometimes as studio owners and founders, which is that we are actually solving an issue, through music.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, and you hear it all the time, you hear from entrepreneurs stories that they say, I never knew I had a business. I was just trying to solve a problem. And it turns out enough other people had problems.
Right.
And you actually just stated the same thing when you're like, I was a young mom in the community. So two things need to be highlighted in that comment. Number one, you knew the customer really intimately. It was the exact same way Brooklyn Music Factory was founded. Pearl was 4, Josie was 6. Our entire first class came through the Playground Network.
Right.
It was all parental friends that I knew on the playground.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But secondly, as a young parent, you do have a lot of things you're trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And one of them is like bringing back to your opening reply to Daniel about what it is. You said, you wanted to make a program that addressed the whole child. And as a parent, we're really in many ways, we're really stumped. We've got this newborn. Yep. We're trying to figure out what they are and what to do.
Yes.
So you go into a community which can be that KinderMusic classroom, and it serves so many more purposes than simply a music class.
Absolutely. Yes.
And I think you're acutely aware of that as a young mom in that story you're telling.
Right.
And you're acutely aware of that when you're speaking to potential customers. Right?
Yeah.
And so for our listeners, it's really important to remember that we are putting ourselves into the space of the customer always.
Right.
When we're telling that story, that not just the features of KinderMusic, that it's a really well researched program, but that there are all these benefits to us as a parent.
Yes.
So I love that addition.
And I would just
I'm going to ping it back to you.
Yeah. I would just add on something that I heard from one of my mentors. I wasn't actually here. I only watched the recording of this mastermind because it actually happened before I was really even in business for myself. I only was able to watch this later. He had this phrase, be smart enough to know when you're getting lucky. And Jessica, just when you were telling that story of getting the mailing list and it was already there, but they were leaving, and then you had this understanding of the market because you were that person. You were the person you wanted to serve. That is a good example, because I just think of all the school owners that try to force a program, push a program.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of happened for you, and you just naturally moved into it. One might even say it was a risky move, and you were kind of saying in our last episode that you're risk averse, but here you start this program and it blows up and balloons into something huge that has really sustained your school for a long time. And so I would just say be smart enough to know when you're getting lucky. And then the only other thing I would also mention, just in kind of highlighting something, is that the way to prevent having these business disasters or creating programs that nobody wants or that sort of thing is just to be constantly surveying and listening to the people you serve. I get, as a business coach, I get people coming to me almost every month saying, hey, I've got this idea. I want to build this curriculum, or
Mm-hmm.
I have a new take on music flashcards and I want to build $1 million business out of it. That's my goal. And they're so excited about it. And I'm just like, maybe just go sell it on Teachers Pay Teachers. Like, I don't know if the music industry is like ready for $1 million business around music flashcards. I don't know if the demand is there. And so often people have a great idea,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't actually do the market research. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would just say, sometimes your gut will serve you. Most of the time it won't. Anyway, but you read the tea leaves perfectly, Jessica. So that's awesome. But I don't want to make it sound like it was luck. So that kind of leads into my most weighty question that I had for you that I wanted to ask on this episode. What's or that you've grown your program to an unusual size. What are the things that you feel have contributed to that growth? So want to get away from the inception of this program, the early years.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's kind of look at everything that's happened since those initial first steps you took. What are some of those key milestones along the way? What do you feel has been really helpful in promoting this program? What have you done to keep retention high? What have you done to have parents keep coming back with the more children they have? They enroll them all in the program. I want
Right.
to get into the meat of this.
Yeah. Wow, that's a lot. There's a lot of different pieces, certainly, that go
Mm,
into this. I think, foundationally, for sure, you've got to believe in this as a leader. I think you got to know your why, and really, I mean, a preschool program sounds great from a business perspective, but like you said too, Daniel, just what does your customer want, and how can you speak to that, and how can you meet that need, and do you believe in it? I mean, why do you want a preschool program? Why is it beneficial? Not just from a business perspective, but from a child development perspective, and even from a parent's perspective. Why is this important? So make sure that you're really, really clear on that. And then, because I find it to be the really foundational building block of our company, it is where I have hyper focus. I mean, it's just really where I put all of my energy as the leader of this company. As far as even marketing dollars, it's my primary intake program. So really, we don't market for lessons very much at all. It's a lot of marketing into our KinderMusic program, because if we can have a strong foundation like that, those are just natural feeders into our lesson programs. And the goal is not really to have to market for lessons, because we've just got this natural feeder from KinderMusic into there. So I hyper focus on marketing and messaging around that in our marketing. I think the struggle is still, especially in our small kind of blue collar Midwestern community, is education. Like, why still? I mean, I can relate to that, because even as a young mom and a musician myself, I was still like, why? Why should I put my baby in a music class and spend this much money? What are the benefits? And so learning the ways to communicate that, so that they'll believe it enough to come in the door. And then once they're in the door, do we have stellar staff who are quickly communicating and giving an experience that they go, oh, I get it now. Now I want to stick around. And now I'm making friends. And now my kid is doing this and that, that I never thought they could do, until we came into a music class. So, yeah, I would say those are some really important pieces. And making sure that your training process for your team is really solid, and that you are replicating yourself enough so that you're not the only only person who knows how to do this. So,
Okay, I was taking notes really rapidly, and this is what I got. Know your
okay.
why,
Yep.
hyper focus on the program,
Yep.
stellar staff, awesome training, and build community. Those are like the ways that I would
Yeah.
summarize what you said. Do you feel that that is a good summary?
Yes, for sure. Yep.
Okay.
And then I would even circle back to finding support for yourself, just making sure that you're in a community of like-minded business owners and friends that can support you in this. So,
Then boy, there's we could probably do 6 episodes on just
yeah,
these 6 points.
right.
I feel like maybe the most abstract one is the idea of hyper focusing on this because it's the foundational building block of the school.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe could you unpack that one for us a little bit? What does it mean to you to hyper focus on this?
Well, I believe that KinderMusic is the lifeblood of our studio. This is where, if we fail at this, I feel like I would fail at my work. I mean, even for me personally, it is my mission. It is part of my big vision is to be a community that supports families. I just don't have as much passion personally for just providing lessons necessarily. I really am personally passionate about the KinderMusic program and what it offers for families for their entire lives. And so that kind of belief just drives my work. And that is that, when I'm working on marketing, when I'm working on training, when I'm working on onboarding and offboarding and all of that, it is with that in mind. And it's really with the preschool program in mind, top of mind. So, yeah.
So if I heard you correctly, because what's interesting is on that question, you kind of went back to the why, but so let me rephrase, because I wanted to focus on what it means for you to hyper focus on it.
Yeah.
But I feel like maybe you did answer it in there where you were talking about building out all the systems and the marketing and is that what you mean?
Yes. So my role, I feel like my role right now in the business is to continue to keep KinderMusic successful. And there's so many pieces that go into that. But certainly, I mean, like I said, all of our marketing dollars are spent on ads for KinderMusic and, creating those. And figuring out how to reach people. Like, what are the educational components that we need to verbalize that help people believe enough to just come in the door, to pay us for 1 month. Just let us have you for a month. And then after that, of course, is making sure that my teachers then are giving them an experience that they'll want to stay longer than a month. And that for me is a lot of teacher training. I'm meeting with my team weekly, my KinderMusic team. We go over lesson plans. We talk about different nuances of the lesson plans, how we're going to highlight different things each week, benefit statements for families, how this helps in your daily life, your parenting, really helping them parents see beyond the classroom, why this is valuable beyond the 45 minutes a week. So it's tons and tons of teacher mentorship and oversight and training that I do that I feel like is a really needed and key part of my work to keep this KinderMusic program a vibrant,
Well,
program.
Before I kick it over, I'm sure Nate has tons of questions. Before I kick it over to him, I do want to ask one more question because you referenced this several times already in this episode and you referenced it in the last episode. And you said, and I imagine this is bigger than KinderMusic. This will apply to anyone who's either thinking of starting a preschool program or already has one. But it's the idea of selling parents on bringing their 1-year-old in for a preschool program. That is actually a really fascinating marketing challenge to me. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, I think maybe in some other, maybe bigger communities or communities that are a little bit, there's tons now of research out on the impact of music on the developing brain and how important it is. They're really, if you look even for a second, you'll find a lot. And so people who have an interest in that or maybe are a little bit higher educated, maybe would have a base understanding that maybe I should put my little one in a music class. I've kind of heard that's a good idea. But around here, I feel like maybe that's not quite as understood, that that's an important, everybody thinks maybe my 6-year-old should be in piano lessons, or my 3-year-old should learn to
Yeah.
swim. Like, this is sort of like part of the natural process of growing up. But I don't think that it's normal here for people to think my 2-year-old should be in music classes. So,
Okay, so yes, so then I want to push in on this point, because we all know logically we should eat more vegetables and less chocolate. We all know logically, that children develop in early childhood in a rapid way. What's the emotional argument you make? Because I don't think you're selling parents on, oh, well, this is the logical thing to do for your 1-year-old. There's got to be an emotional appeal. There's got to be like a nugget. There's got to be a belief that just exudes out of you. What is that for you? What is that pitch?
well, I mean, I believe that what we're offering families is helping their children become socialized. I mean, I think every parent wants that. They want their child to be a good friend, to know how to share, to learn how to listen, to be flexible. And I think so those life skills are the ones that we really, really highlight. I think I could talk till I'm kind of blue in the face about the importance of early childhood music education, and I'd have a lot of support, scientific support. But I don't know that that's what's going to convince a parent.
Yes, I agree.
So I think what they want is a good human. And how am I going to create and help my child be a good human? And we can offer that. It's so much more than music. So kind of our tagline is music now, skills for life, music. So it's so much more than just music. It's really teaching them how to be socialized and nice, kind humans. And so that is where I really put a lot of our weight in, even our ad copy, in the educational little videos that I do, both in-house and even in marketing. And even some marketing surveys that we've done, or even surveys of our own families, like why did you come and why did you stay, have been a couple of questions that we've asked. And the why I wanted to come is I just wanted something fun to do with my kid. And there's not a whole lot of options for 2-year-olds. So I just wanted something fun. And then but why I stayed is the relationships that we've made and the skills that my child has learned on in all sorts of areas. And it's usually not even musical skills that they're referring to. So, yeah.
This episode is sponsored by GroupLessons.com. If you're looking for a group piano method that is easy to implement in your studio or school, look no farther than Piano Express from GroupLessons.com. Because unlike most group piano methods, Piano Express allows students to make individual progress within the context of a larger group. And because of the at-home practice tools and gamified curriculum, students using the Piano Express method make faster progress than the average method book student. And that helps students feel excited, accomplished, and motivated to learn new music. Also, the system is really adaptable. We've got teachers using the system in their home studios, and we have many large commercial studios running our 3-room model that allows you to see up to 24 students per hour with just 2 teachers. So if you'd like to learn more about Piano Express, navigate to grouplessons.com and sign up for a free demo. You'll get to look at the method, our app and teacher guides, and we'll even give you a sneak peek of our implementation plan that has helped hundreds of studios start their group program in just a few weeks.
Man, Jessica, you're touching on there are so many gold nuggets to our listeners. This is definitely a notebook episode where you should be taking lots of notes. I'm speaking to our listeners right now, but that last, you just glossed over it, but it's such a level up for music school owners, where you said you surveyed your customers. You didn't survey them when they were leaving, which we always do that. We always
Right.
Why are you leaving?
Right.
You surveyed those that are staying.
Right.
Why did you come? Why are you staying? And then you talked about how it changed your ad copy. You talked about how it changed the way you were communicating with your new potential customers. I want to zero in on one of the, shall we call it, it's not the Fab Five, it's like the Supreme Six. Know your why. Be hyper-focused. stellar staff, build community, awesome training, and then that final one you said finding support for yourself. You said that your teachers need awesome training above and beyond all of the great training that KinderMusic gives, right? I'm curious. I heard one thing that I think is fascinating, but I'm curious if you might highlight 2 or 3 other areas our listeners know they need to invest.
Mm.
You said we come up with, quote, benefit statements. That's amazing to me, by the way. I'm going to bring that to my team and say, I got to tell you about what my friend does, right? But what I hear there is training and communication.
Yeah.
Right? How to consistently communicate benefits rather than features.
Right.
We learn this instrument is nowhere near as interesting as we developed how to share the instrument.
Right.
You know, we talked about sharing instruments. That's much more interesting to us. So am I right there? Training and communication is definitely one area where you're like, we need to add on to the KinderMusic training.
Right.
Can you give me like 1 or 2 other areas where you just know you keep coming back? Your 20 plus years of experience are essential to your teachers?
Yeah, there's actually 5 points of training that I almost rinse and repeat over and over again with my team and bring back to them in trying some fresh ways. But certainly, I mean, and it's all really the points of retention, because obviously the goal is we want people to stick around. We want our retention numbers to, and I just think that there's some really important points of retention that we need to be hitting on all the time with my staff, and how will that look in a KinderMusic classroom. So obviously the benefits is a big one. Parents need to know that this runs deeper than a fun play group. Like that's not going to stick. So why am I here? So, that one. Also, connection. So how are we building connections and relationships in the classroom? So there's training around that between parent and child, teacher and student. I mean, all the different layers of connection. So that's a huge one. Progression is a huge one that I train on as well, is like, where have we been and where are we going and what can we get excited about that's coming up. So I think that's another huge point of retention. People need to know where we're going. Like, why? Yeah. And then another one is just stability and creativity. So kind of that whole balance of a predictable classroom routine versus some variety and kind of the wow factor. What are we bringing this week that will surprise and delight them? That so we're not getting stagnant in our teaching, and that's kind of helpful for our more veteran teachers who maybe are pretty established, have taught this curriculum over and over again. And how can we continue to surprise and delight our students and even ourselves? So kind of thinking outside the box in some creative ways. So anyway, those are just, some points that I'm constantly training on and trying to even, think myself, even after 20 years of teaching this stuff, it's helpful for me to keep remembering these different points of retention. So that's really where
I love this. Yeah. And I was going to be like, can we review this? But what I love is that Daniel is taking immaculate notes. So I'm going to, for our listeners' benefit, I'm going to say out loud what you just said, because the fundamental principle that all of our listeners need to take home with them is the rinse and repeat comment.
Yay.
Yes. It has to be systematized. I completely agree.
It's got to be systematized. And listeners, you're hearing from someone who's been in the trenches for what, 20 years, Jess? More than that.
Yeah.
Long time you've been doing it, and you weren't always rinsing and repeating, I'm guessing. So you said, just to recap, benefit statements or training to the benefits, training to connections, i.e. that triangle, connection between teacher and parent, teacher and child, and child, right? The progression, I love how you wrote this, or said this rather, where have we been and where are we going? And then stability, or predictable classroom and routine, plus creativity, the wow factor. We don't want the predictability to turn into sort of stagnation and boredom. I'm going to highlight this, though, for all of our listeners. Your young teachers, i.e. 1 to 3 years, they desperately need predictability.
Yes.
So you need to just pound home predictability. Your 3 to 5 year teachers, they're the ones who you need to inspire creativity. Am I right there, Jessica?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is why I do love the KinderMusic curriculum, is because the lesson plans are written, they're there. And if you're a brand new teacher, just teach to the plan and you'll be fine. I trust the content, but what I'm really wanting to challenge my more veteran teachers is, let's get a little creative. What can we do a little differently? How can we do this more creatively? So yeah, there's definitely stages of training.
In your original 6 things that you said helped
Mm-hmm.
contribute to the growth, the one of them that we have not talked about yet is what you called stellar staff.
Yeah.
And there's no way you'd have been able to get out of the classroom without that. What do you
Right.
look for? What are you looking for that would make someone stellar and able to run this program really well for you?
Yeah, it is still a sticking point for sure. I mean, it is a tricky role to hire for. I will not sugarcoat that at all. I mean, we just all know that the hours, for one thing, are tricky. We've got morning and evening hours. It's a split shift kind of thing. I mean, just the logistics are hard. But then, yeah, finding the right skill set for a KinderMusic teacher is not easy. It really, some of my best teachers have been parents in the studio, that I can see get it, like really, really value what we're doing and understand the depth of what we're offering. So I have tapped a few parents on the shoulder to be teachers. And then, I have advertised in some of the traditional ways, and we just go through a pretty rigorous uh, application process and interviewing process, and then the training process is just long. And I really try to be clear up front, like, if this is not a stepping stone kind of job, this is, of course you can't make any promises to or from people, but I really need you to be here for 2 years. It's not worth your time or mine if you don't have any intention to be here longer than 2 years, because it's hard for them. It's a big learning curve. There's a lot of curriculum to learn. But after you do it for a year or a year and a half, it does repeat, and it does get easier, and more understandable. But anyway, it's intense, and I do find a lot of struggle yet still in that. And then, though, once I have good staff, I feel like one of my other main jobs is to do what I can to keep them around. Like, how am I supporting, like, staff retention is really big on my list of, like, I do not want to train a new teacher. You guys got to stick around, and how can I help that happen? So that's
How
another
many
big conversation. So
Yeah, right.
yeah.
I feel like I want to spend another hour on that. How
Yeah.
many KinderMusic teachers do you have across the 3 locations right now? These stellar
Yes.
teachers.
So there are 6 of us, including me.
6 total. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And do you only have one in studio any given day, or how does that work?
No, we have coinciding classes, so we
Oh,
can
I see.
have 2 to 4 even in
Okay.
a studio. Yeah.
Okay. That's really
Yep.
helpful to know.
Yeah.
The two that the 2 points that you made that we hadn't really talked about too much was build community and find support for yourself, though you did mention that in the 5 for 5. Maybe as we wrap here, do you want to speak to these 6 again in general, or just like or maybe a good way to end would be to say, if you had a time machine and could go back and give your younger self advice, like, what 3 pieces of advice would you have about the program or growing a preschool program, just with the benefit of hindsight? Or maybe you feel like you've already said what you had to say along that. I don't know.
Well, I can speak to the community building piece, since I
Okay.
haven't talked about that a little bit. And it is actually one of the highest reasons people do stay, is it's strong retention piece for our families. And I think it is making sure that I have staff that are, of course, really good social people. They really enjoy chit-chatting and creating communities within their classroom. But we also do a lot as a studio in building community outside of the classroom. So we do, parents' night outs. We do field trips with families. We do studio events. And one of our goals for this year, one of our projects, is to build on that and really help people become we would just want more people involved in, because people need friends. And I just feel like, especially since COVID, I don't know, maybe I'm making this up, but I just feel like we've lost some sense of community and communal, kind of the village. It takes a village to raise these humans, and it's hard work. And I just want to be a place of support for families to feel like I needed Take Note Studio to help me be a good parent and to make friends. And that's the kind of reputation we want to have. So that is actually one of our projects that we're working on this year. So anyway, yeah, that's the community piece. And I would say that's a huge reason people stick around. My friends are there. So.
It's interesting, Jessica, how much of a buzzword like build community has been.
Right.
And Daniel and I have talked about this before, and Brooklyn Music Factory, I would leave the music lessons behind and just keep the community.
Right.
Honestly, I always consider just what we do as developing a community center.
Right.
And
it's a means to an end. Yeah.
Yes, totally. It sounds very similar to you. And I would just, like Daniel and I often say, encourage our listeners to be very mindful not to just grab the idea and think if I plug it into my school, it's going to work. Instead, go back to your initial comment, which is you really need to know the why behind the idea. And so a parent's night out is a great idea, like really, really stellar idea. But you as a listener need to understand, what would be your why behind that?
Right.
And then what would the version of a parent's night out that felt really, truly authentic to you as a school owner look and feel like? And take that extra step. Take those extra 2 or 3 steps in your assessment of all of these great ideas you've shared, Jessica. Because what we don't want to do, and you've heard me, I repeat this so often at the Founders Forum, but Daniel does as well, which is we don't want to provide these ideas of tips and tricks.
Right.
What we want to provide is the wisdom you're sharing, these great lists, the rinse and repeat ideas around teacher training, so that it becomes a starting point for our listeners to begin to think differently about their business. This isn't just like an advice column.
Right.
And what I appreciate, and this is the final thing I'll say this ep, but Jessica, what I really appreciate about you on the pod is that you're bringing 20 plus years of experience, and you're bringing the wisdom of a parent that no longer has a toddler, but you started your company when at least one of them was a toddler, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's just lovely to have that perspective for our listeners. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.